My friends keep asking why I'm with you, she admitted. Honestly, I'm starting to wonder too. The coffee shop was nearly empty when Rachel said the words that would change everything between us. She stirred her latte with that silver spoon she always used, the one she'd take from the container even when they gave her a wooden stick. Her eyes didn't meet mine when she spoke, just stayed fixed on the swirling foam. My friends keep asking why I'm with you, she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. Honestly, I'm starting to wonder too. The words hung in the air like smoke, thick and suffocating. Hello friends, before I continue the story, please support the channel by becoming a subscriber and giving the video a like. Also, let us know in the comments where you're watching right now. I'm Marcus, 31 years old, and I'd spent the last 5 years thinking I'd found the person I'd grow old with. Rachel was 29, a paralegal at a downtown firm, ambitious and driven in ways I'd always admired. We met at a charity fundraiser where I was volunteering, setting up chairs and audio equipment while she worked the room in a blue dress that caught the light. She approached me during a break, asked if I knew where the restroom was, and somehow we ended up talking for 2 hours. That was 5 years ago, back when her questions felt like genuine curiosity rather than interrogation. I worked as a high school English teacher at an underfunded public school on the west side. The pay was modest, barely enough to cover my share of expenses, but I loved it. My students were tough kids, many from broken homes, and I saw myself in their struggles. I'd grown up in the same neighborhood, raised by a single mother who worked 2 jobs to keep me fed and clothed. Teaching wasn't just a career for me. It was a calling, a way to give back what had been given to me. Rachel knew all this when we started dating, or at least I thought she understood. She'd come to my classroom after school sometimes in those early days, sitting in the back while I helped students with their essays. She'd smile when they made breakthroughs, when their eyes lit up understanding a metaphor or crafting a strong thesis. You're really good at this, she'd tell me on the drive home. But somewhere along the line, that admiration curdled into something else. The shift happened gradually, like a tide you don't notice until you're already underwater. About 2 years into our relationship, Rachel started climbing the ladder at her firm, landing bigger cases and rubbing shoulders with partners. Her salary doubled, then tripled mine, and with it came a new circle of friends. These weren't the college buddies she'd introduced me to early on, the ones who hosted game nights and potlucks. These were corporate lawyers, investment bankers, consultants with designer watches and weekend homes in the Hamptons. We moved in together after 3 years, splitting a decent apartment in a neighborhood halfway between our workplaces. I say splitting, but really Rachel covered about 70% of the rent because she insisted on a place with granite countertops and a doorman. I contributed what I could, picked up groceries, handled utilities, cooked most of our meals. It seemed fair at the time, a partnership where we each gave according to our means. Looking back, I see how that imbalance became ammunition. The dinner parties started around year 4. Rachel would host colleagues and their partners, elaborate affairs with wine pairings and catered appetizers. I'd help set up, play the gracious co-host, engage in conversations about market trends and corporate mergers. They'd ask what I did, and when I said I taught high school English, the responses were always the same. "Oh, that's so noble," they'd say with condescending smiles. I could never do that, dealing with teenagers all day. Rachel's best friend Vanessa was the worst of them all. She was a corporate lawyer, divorced twice by 35, with a penthouse and a rotation of younger boyfriends. She'd corner me at these parties, glass of expensive wine in hand, asking invasive questions. "Don't you ever want more, Marcus?" she'd probe. "I mean, teaching is sweet and all, but what about your future, your ambitions?" I'd deflect politely, but her judgment was clear in every raised eyebrow. The other members of Rachel's new inner circle weren't much better. There was Derek, an investment banker who drove a Tesla and talked constantly about his portfolio. There was Simone, a marketing executive who'd never met a brand she couldn't name drop. And there was James, a corporate consultant who'd recently started his own firm and clearly had his eye on Rachel. They'd all gather in our living room, drinking our wine, and I'd catch their glances when they thought I wasn't looking. Rachel started spending more time with this crowd outside our apartment too. weekend brunches that stretched into afternoons, happy hours that became late nights, networking events I wasn't invited to. "It's work stuff, babe," she'd explain when I asked. "You'd be bored out of your mind listening to us talk about contracts and depositions." I trusted her, so I didn't push, just used the time to grade papers and plan lessons. But the distance grew wider with each passing month. Our conversations became transactional, logistics about groceries and bills rather than dreams and ideas. Sex became infrequent, perfunctory when it happened, like she was checking a box. I tried to bridge the gap with romantic gestures, cooking her favorite meals and planning date nights. She'd come home distracted, scrolling through her phone, barely tasting the food I'd spent hours preparing. I noticed her social media changing too, where she used to post pictures of us together, hiking trips and lazy Sunday mornings. Now it was all professional milestones and group shots with her colleagues. I appeared less and less in her digital life, edited out of the narrative. When I mentioned it casually, she laughed it off. "Don't be insecure," she said. "Not everything has to be about us." The comments started subtle, little digs disguised as observations. "Derek just bought a lake house," she'd mention over breakfast. "Can you imagine having that kind of financial freedom?" Or, "Simone's boyfriend surprised her with a trip to Dubai for her birthday. Isn't that romantic?" Each comment felt like a paper cut, small on its own but accumulating into a deeper wound. I'd remind myself that money wasn't everything, that my work had meaning beyond a paycheck. Then came the conversations about my career, increasingly frequent and pointed. "Have you ever thought about getting your admin credentials?" Rachel would ask. "You could be a principal, make decent money." Or, "What about tutoring on the side? Some of those SAT prep companies pay really well." She'd frame it as concern for our future, for the family she said she wanted. But underneath was the implication that what I was doing wasn't enough. I considered it, honestly I did. The idea of making more money, of being able to contribute equally or maybe even impress her friends. But every time I thought about leaving my classroom, about abandoning kids who needed someone to believe in them, something in me resisted. This wasn't just about stubbornness or pride. It was about purpose. I'd seen too many good teachers leave for administrative roles they hated, chasing paychecks while students suffered. About 6 months before that coffee shop conversation, things deteriorated sharply. Rachel got promoted to senior paralegal, a huge achievement that came with a significant raise. We celebrated with champagne, and I was genuinely proud of her accomplishment. But at the celebration dinner with her colleagues, the conversation turned to partners and spouses. Derek's wife was a doctor, Simone's boyfriend owned a startup, James was dating a fellow consultant. When Rachel introduced me as a teacher, I saw something flash across her face that looked uncomfortably like shame. The next morning, she brought it up over breakfast. "Do you ever feel like we're in different places in our lives?" she asked carefully. I lowered my coffee, sensing danger in the question. "What do you mean?" She picked at her toast, avoiding my eyes. "I don't know, like I'm moving forward in my career and you're just kind of staying put." The accusation stung precisely because of how unfair it was. I wasn't stagnant. I was dedicated to work that mattered more than profit margins. "Teaching isn't staying put, Rachel," I said, trying to keep my voice level. "I'm shaping lives every single day." She sighed, that particular sigh that meant she didn't want to argue but also didn't agree. I know it's important work. I'm just saying maybe there's room for both meaning and money in a career." The conversation ended there, but the seed was planted. Her friends became more openly critical after that. At a gallery opening we attended together, Vanessa pulled Rachel aside but spoke loud enough for me to hear. "Girl, when are you going to upgrade?" she said with a laugh. "You're killing it at work. You deserve someone on your level." Rachel laughed uncomfortably, neither agreeing nor defending me. I pretended not to hear, studied a painting of a ship in a storm, feeling like I was drowning. James started appearing more frequently in Rachel's stories and plans. "James thinks I should apply for the associate position," she'd say. Or, "James invited the team for drinks after work tomorrow." The way she said his name with a certain brightness, made my stomach turn. I wasn't the jealous type typically, but something about James felt like a direct threat. He represented everything I wasn't: wealthy, ambitious in the corporate sense, part of her world. I tried talking to Rachel about my concerns, choosing a quiet Sunday morning when we were both home. "I feel like we're drifting apart," I said carefully. "Like your friends and your work are pulling you away from us." She looked up from her laptop, annoyed at the interruption. "That's not fair, Marcus. I'm building a career, something I'm good at. You could do the same if you wanted." There it was again, the implication that my choices were holding us both back. We had our first real fight that day, voices raised in ways they'd never been before. I accused her of valuing money over meaning, of letting her toxic friends poison what we had. She countered that I was too comfortable, too content with mediocrity, unwilling to strive for more. "Maybe I want a partner who has ambition beyond a classroom," she shouted. "Maybe I'm tired of being the only one who cares about building a real future." Her words cut deep because they revealed what she'd been thinking all along. The aftermath of that fight was a cold war. We moved around each other like strangers, polite but distant. I slept on the couch for a week before she finally said we needed to talk like adults. We had a stilted conversation where we both apologized without really meaning it, where we agreed to try harder. But the damage was done, we both knew it. Trust had cracked, and no amount of forced date nights could seal it back together. I threw myself into work during this period, staying late at school to help struggling students and sponsor the creative writing club. My kids were preparing for a poetry slam, and watching them find their voices gave me something her world couldn't. One of my students, Deshaun, a kid who'd barely spoken in class at the start of the year, performed a piece about his father's incarceration that brought the room to tears. That feeling, knowing I'd helped him reach that breakthrough, was worth more than any portfolio Derek could boast about. But at home, the contrast became unbearable. Rachel would come back from her networking events buzzing with energy, talking about cases and opportunities, and I'd share stories about my students to deaf ears. "That's nice," she'd say dismissively before launching back into her own narrative. We were living parallel lives, intersecting only in shared space and dwindling obligation. The relationship was a shell, and we both felt it. Her birthday came around in early September, and I planned something special despite the tension. I couldn't afford Dubai, but I rented a cabin upstate for the weekend, somewhere quiet where we could reconnect. I'd saved for months from my modest salary, packed her favorite foods, downloaded movies she'd mentioned wanting to see. When I told her about it, she seemed pleased, or at least she smiled. "That sounds nice," she said, and for a moment, I thought maybe we could salvage things. The weekend started well enough. The drive up was peaceful, autumn colors just beginning to show in the trees. We talked about surface things, music and podcasts, avoiding the landmines that had defined our recent conversations. The cabin was small but cozy, with a fireplace and a view of the lake. I cooked her birthday dinner, pasta carbonara from scratch, and we ate by candlelight. For a few hours, it felt like old times, like we were the same people who'd talked for hours at that fundraiser. But the illusion shattered on Saturday night. Rachel's phone kept buzzing during dinner, messages she couldn't ignore. "Sorry, work thing," she kept saying, typing rapid responses. I didn't push it, just cleared the dishes while she paced outside on the deck. When she came back in, her energy had shifted entirely. "Everything okay?" I asked. "Yeah, fine," she said, but her tone was clipped. She spent the rest of the evening on her laptop, handling an urgent issue that couldn't wait until Monday. Sunday morning, I woke to find her already packed. "I'm really sorry, Marcus, but I need to get back to the city," she said without looking at me. "This case is blowing up and I need to be in the office." I felt something break inside me then, the final thread of hope snapping. "It's Sunday," I said quietly. "It's your birthday weekend." She finally met my eyes, and what I saw there was irritation, not apology. "Some of us have responsibilities that don't stop for weekends," she said. The implication was clear. "Unlike you." We drove back in silence, 2 hours of unspoken resentment filling the car. I dropped her at our apartment and drove aimlessly for a while, unable to face going inside. I ended up at my mother's house, the small two-bedroom where I'd grown up. She took one look at my face and pulled me inside. "What happened, baby?" she asked. I told her everything, the whole sorry story pouring out. She listened without judgment, then gave me the hardest advice I'd ever received. "Sometimes love isn't enough," she said. "Sometimes people grow apart, and the kindest thing is to let them go." I knew she was right, but knowing and accepting are different things. I spent the next few weeks in a fog, going through the motions of teaching while my personal life crumbled. Rachel and I barely spoke, our apartment feeling more like a storage facility than a home. She'd stay late at the office most nights, come home after I was already in bed. When we did cross paths, the conversations were about logistics. We were roommates at best, strangers at worst. Then came the night before that coffee shop conversation. Rachel came home earlier than usual, around 8, and actually sat down in the living room where I was grading papers. "Can we talk tomorrow?" she asked. "Really talk, not just about bills and schedules." I looked up, saw something in her face that looked like determination. "Sure," I said. "Where?" She suggested the coffee shop near her office, neutral territory. I agreed, though dread settled in my stomach. I barely slept that night, running through scenarios of what she might say. Part of me hoped she'd want to fight for us to recommit and rebuild. But a deeper, more honest part knew what was coming. I'd felt it building for months, the slow dissolution of us into something unrecognizable. When my alarm went off at 6, I laid in bed listening to her shower, wondering if this would be our last morning under the same roof. The coffee shop was one of those trendy places with exposed brick and overpriced pastries. Rachel was already there when I arrived, sitting at a corner table with her latte. She dressed up for work, sharp blazer and heels, looking every bit the successful professional. I was in my usual teacher clothes, khakis and a button-down, suddenly aware of the visual disparity. I sat down across from her, ordered a black coffee from the hovering barista, and waited. She made small talk for a few minutes, asking about my students and my mother, clearly stalling. I let her, knowing she needed to work up to whatever she'd brought me here to say. Finally, she took a deep breath and started speaking. "I've been doing a lot of thinking," she began. "About us, about where we're going, about whether we're right for each other anymore." Her words were careful, rehearsed, like a speech she'd practiced. Then came the blow I'd been bracing for. "My friends keep asking why I'm with you," she admitted, still not meeting my eyes. "Honestly, I'm starting to wonder too." The coffee shop noise faded to a dull roar. I sat there absorbing the words, feeling them land like physical blows. 5 years, and it came down to her friends' opinions, to doubts she'd been harboring and feeding. I could have gotten angry, could have made a scene, but instead, I felt something cold and clear settle over me. This was who she was, who she'd become, someone who valued external validation over genuine connection. "Is that all?" I asked quietly. She looked startled by my calm. "I mean, there's more to discuss, what we do about the apartment, how we divide things." I shook my head. "I meant, is that all you feel? Doubt based on what your friends think?" She had the decency to look uncomfortable. "It's not just them, Marcus," she said defensively. "It's everything. The difference in our careers, our social circles, our goals. I want someone who's ambitious, who wants to build an empire. You want to teach high school forever, and that's fine, but it's not what I need." The honesty was brutal but also clarifying. She wasn't wrong about our differences. She was wrong about which path had value. "So what are you saying exactly?" I asked, needing to hear her say it. She straightened her shoulders, corporate Rachel in full effect. "I think we should break up," she said, cleanly, "before we resent each other more than we already do. We want different things, and that's okay. But staying together isn't fair to either of us." The logic was sound, but the delivery was cold, transactional. This was how she'd handle a failed business deal, cutting losses. I nodded slowly, surprisingly calm considering my life was imploding. "Okay," I said simply, "if that's what you want." She blinked, clearly expecting more resistance. "Just like that?" she asked. You're not going to fight for us? I met her eyes then, really looked at her. You just told me your friends don't approve and you're questioning why you're with me, I said. What exactly would I be fighting for? The conversation wrapped up quickly after that, logistics and timelines discussed with painful efficiency. The apartment was in her name, so I'd move out. We'd split the furniture we'd bought together, sell what neither wanted. She'd keep her circle, I'd keep mine. It was all very adult and civilized and absolutely gutting. We finished our coffees in heavy silence, the weight of 5 years ending in a chain coffee shop. Walking out into the morning sun felt surreal. Business people rushed past to their offices. Tourists snapped photos. The city churned on indifferent to my personal catastrophe. Rachel headed toward her office without looking back, already moving on. I stood on the sidewalk for a moment, untethered and oddly light. Then I called my principal and took a personal day. I spent that day walking through the city, processing what had happened. Part of me wanted to feel devastated, to collapse under the weight of rejection and failed futures. But mostly I felt relief, like a heavy coat I'd been wearing in summer heat had finally been removed. Rachel was right about one thing: we wanted different things. I just wished she'd realized it before wasting 5 years of our lives. The next few days were a blur of packing and logistics. I crashed at my mother's place, the same small bedroom I'd occupied as a kid, now filled with boxes of my adult life. She didn't pry, just made sure I ate and had clean clothes for work. My students noticed something was off, asked if I was okay with that brutal teenage directness. Just some personal stuff, I told them. I'll be fine. Rachel sent formal texts about dividing our belongings, suggesting times I could come get my things. I took a weekend day when she'd be out with friends, loaded my modest possessions into a borrowed truck. The apartment looked the same but felt foreign, already erased of my presence. I left my key on the counter with a note. Hope you find what you're looking for. I meant it even though it hurt. My principal, Mrs. Chun, called me into her office the following Monday. She was a tough woman who'd run our school for 15 years. No nonsense but fair. Marcus, I'm not going to pretend I don't know something's going on, she said. You've seemed off, and while your work hasn't suffered, I worry about you. I appreciated her directness, gave her the broad strokes without excess detail. Her response surprised me. Good, she said bluntly. Anyone who makes you question your value isn't worth keeping. She had news that shifted my trajectory entirely. The district is opening a new alternative school for at-risk students, she explained. They're looking for someone to build the English program from the ground up. It's more responsibility, a modest pay increase, but mainly it's a chance to do what you do best with kids who need it most. The opportunity felt like a lifeline, a way to channel my pain into purpose. I applied that day. The interview process took 3 weeks, during which I stayed busy rebuilding my life. I found a small studio apartment in a neighborhood I could actually afford on my salary. Nothing fancy but mine. I reconnected with friends I'd neglected during my relationship with Rachel, other teachers and college buddies who valued substance over status. We'd meet for cheap dinners and game nights, and I remembered what genuine friendship felt like. I also started therapy, something I'd always dismissed but desperately needed. My therapist, Dr. Green, was a patient listener who helped me untangle 5 years of slow erosion. You gave up parts of yourself trying to fit into her world, she observed during one session. The question is, who are you without that pressure? It was harder to answer than I expected, but the work of rediscovering myself felt essential. The alternative school position came through in mid-October. I'd start after Thanksgiving, giving me time to finish the semester with my current students. My creative writing club won the district poetry slam that month, Deshaun taking first place with his powerful performance. Watching him accept that trophy, seeing his grandmother cry with pride, reminded me exactly why I taught. This was my ambition, my empire. Lives changed through words and belief. Meanwhile, I heard through mutual acquaintances that Rachel was thriving in her career. She'd made associate, was being fast-tracked toward partner, traveling for high-profile cases. There were photos on social media of her at firm events, always surrounded by her squad, looking successful and happy. I didn't follow her accounts, but friends would mention it, watching for my reaction. I felt nothing but a distant hope that she'd found what she needed. What I didn't know then was that her perfect exterior was cracking behind the scenes. That information would come later, but in those fall months, I was focused entirely on my own healing. I dated casually, nothing serious, just coffee dates and easy conversations. I learned that I'd become smaller in my relationship with Rachel, always conscious of being enough, never just being. Freedom from that constant evaluation was intoxicating. Thanksgiving came, and I spent it with my mother and her church community, people who measured wealth and kindness rather than portfolios. I helped serve dinner at the community center where I'd eaten as a kid, coming full circle. One of the volunteers was a woman named Keisha, a social worker with an easy smile and no pretense. We talked while dishing out turkey, discovered a shared love of science fiction and hiking. When she asked for my number, I gave it without hesitation or comparison to what came before. My new position started in early December, and it was everything I'd hoped for. The alternative school served 40 students who'd been failed by traditional education, kids with truancy issues and trauma and potential that traditional systems couldn't nurture. I had complete freedom to design my curriculum, to meet them where they were. The first day, I asked them to write about a time they felt invisible, and the responses broke my heart and filled it simultaneously. Keisha and I started dating properly after Christmas, slow and easy without the pressure of labels. She'd been married before, divorced amicably, and brought a groundedness to relationships that I'd never experienced. She asked about my ex once, and I gave the honest version. She wanted different things, I explained. She needed someone ambitious in ways I'm not, and that's okay. Keisha studied me thoughtfully. "You're one of the most ambitious people I've met," she said. "You're just ambitious about things that matter." The new year brought new routines and genuine contentment. My students were thriving, several returning to traditional school with skills they'd lacked. My relationship with Keisha deepened naturally, without force or performance. I made enough money to live, found joy in work, surrounded myself with people who valued character over credentials. The life Rachel had dismissed as mediocre felt rich beyond measure. It was March when I heard the first rumors that her perfect life was unraveling. A mutual friend mentioned over drinks that Rachel had been passed over for partner, despite her work. The firm had brought in someone from outside, and she'd been devastated. Then came whispers about James, the consultant she'd always mentioned. Apparently, they'd been having an affair, and when his wife found out, the fallout was nuclear. Rachel's reputation at the firm took a hit for being involved with a married colleague. I felt a complex mix of emotions hearing this. Pity, vindication, residual anger, and ultimately indifference. This wasn't my circus anymore. Her choices and consequences belonged to her. I didn't reach out or gloat, just acknowledged that her path led exactly where mine would have if I'd followed her demands. Success without ethics or genuine connection was hollow, eventually collapsing under its own weight. More details emerged over the following weeks through the gossip pipeline I didn't ask for but couldn't completely avoid. Vanessa, her best friend and harshest judge of me, had apparently slept with James too, causing a vicious falling out. Derek, the investment banker, was under investigation for fraud. Simone's startup boyfriend had left her for someone younger. The entire squad was imploding, their superficial bonds crumbling under real pressure. Rachel, by all accounts, was isolated and struggling. Then came the messages, starting with a casual email in April. "Hey Marcus, hope you're doing well," Rachel wrote. "I heard you're at a new school. That's great. Would love to catch up sometime if you're open to it." The tone was light, friendly, like we were old college buddies rather than former partners. I didn't respond immediately, needed time to consider whether I even wanted to reopen that door. A week later, she tried again, this time more direct. "I know things ended badly between us, but I've been doing a lot of reflecting," the message read. "I made mistakes, listened to the wrong people, prioritized the wrong things. I miss you, Marcus. I miss us. Can we meet for coffee and talk?" The request felt loaded, manipulative in its vulnerability. This wasn't about me. This was about her needing something. When I didn't respond to that either, she escalated. Phone calls from an unknown number that I let go to voicemail. Marcus, please pick up, her recorded voice pleaded. I know I hurt you, but I'm in a really bad place right now. Everything's falling apart, and you're the only person who ever really knew me. Please, just give me a chance to explain. The desperation was palpable and utterly unappealing. I blocked the number, but she was persistent. She sent a letter to my mother's house, somehow obtaining that address, pouring out apologies and regrets. My friends were toxic, she wrote. They made me believe things that weren't true, that success meant wealth and status. But I've lost everything now, my career momentum, my friends, my self-respect. The only real thing I had was you, and I destroyed it. Please talk to me. The letter was pages long, a confession that might have moved me months earlier but now just felt like manipulation. My mother found the letter first, read enough to understand its nature, and asked what I wanted to do. Nothing, I said. I don't owe her my pain or my healing. My mother nodded approvingly. You're stronger than I was, she said. It took me years to stop letting your father back in. Don't make my mistakes. I promised I wouldn't, though the pressure was mounting. Rachel's family got involved next, a tactic that revealed her desperation. Her mother, who'd always been pleasant but distant during our relationship, called me directly. Marcus, this is Catherine, she began formally. I know you and Rachel had difficulties, but she's really struggling right now. I think if you two could just talk, maybe you could help her find some closure. The assumption that I existed to provide her closure was stunning in its entitlement. I'm sorry she's struggling, I said carefully, but we broke up 6 months ago. I've moved on and she should too. Her mother's tone shifted, becoming sharper. You were together 5 years, Marcus. Doesn't that mean anything to you? She made a mistake listening to those awful friends. But she's learned. Don't you believe in second chances? I wanted to point out that Rachel had never believed in first chances for my career or values, but arguing seemed pointless. I'm not the right person to help her, I said. I'm sorry. Rachel's sister tried next, a woman I'd met perhaps 5 times during our entire relationship. This is really cold, Marcus, she texted. Rachel is depressed, barely eating, and you won't even talk to her. I thought you were supposed to be one of the good guys. The implication that I was somehow responsible for Rachel's mental health after she dumped me was infuriating. I didn't respond, just blocked another number. The harassment peaked when Rachel showed up at my new school. It was late afternoon, and I was wrapping up a session with a student when the front office called my classroom. There's a Rachel Mendez here to see you, the secretary said uncertainly. She says it's urgent. My stomach dropped, but I kept my voice level. Please tell her I'm unavailable and ask her to leave. But Rachel didn't leave easily. By the time I walked my student out, she was in the lobby, looking haggard in a way I'd never seen. Her professional polish had faded, hair unkempt, clothes rumpled, eyes red-rimmed. Marcus, please, she said when she saw me, loud enough that students and staff turned to look. I just need 5 minutes. I've been trying to reach you for weeks. The scene was mortifying, exactly the kind of drama I'd avoided my entire life. I stepped outside with her to avoid making more of a spectacle, though I left the door open. Rachel, you can't show up at my workplace, I said quietly. This is inappropriate. She looked wounded, desperate. I didn't know what else to do. You've blocked me everywhere, won't respond to my messages or my family. I'm drowning here, Marcus. Everything fell apart, the partnership, my friends. James turned out to be a lying piece of trash. You were right about all of it. There it was, the admission that I'd been right, delivered with the expectation that it would change something. I'm sorry things didn't work out for you, I said, and I meant it to an extent. But that doesn't change what happened between us. You told me your friends were asking why you were with me, that you were wondering too. You made your choice, and I've made mine to move forward without you. Her expression shifted through several emotions. Hurt, anger, bargaining. So that's it? She asked, voice rising. 5 years mean nothing because I had some doubts? Everyone has doubts, Marcus. I was confused, influenced by toxic people, but I know better now. I know you're good and stable and everything I actually need. Please, just give me another chance to prove I've changed." The word stable landed like it always had, a backhanded compliment. I was stable, reliable, the safe choice she'd run back to when excitement proved destructive. But I was done being anyone's backup plan. "You haven't changed, Rachel," I said gently but firmly. "You're just scared and alone, and you think I'll fix that. But I'm not here to rescue you from consequences you chose." Anger flashed across her face, the mask slipping. "Wow, you're really going to be like this?" she snapped. "After everything I did for you, letting you live in my apartment, including you in my life even though my friends thought you weren't good enough? This is how you repay me." And there it was, the truth beneath the apology. She still saw me as beneath her, still resented what I represented. "I think you should leave," I said calmly. "If you contact me again, I'll consider it harassment." She stared at me like I was a stranger, which in many ways I was. The man she dated would have folded under pressure, tried to comfort her. This version of me, rebuilt and boundaried, was incomprehensible to her. "Fine," she spat. "Enjoy your mediocre little life with your mediocre little job. I hope it makes you happy." She stormed off, and I watched her go without regret. My principal had witnessed part of the exchange, pulled me aside afterward. "Ex?" she asked simply. I nodded. "Want to talk about it?" I shook my head. "Just someone who couldn't see value in what we do here," I said. Mrs. Chun smiled slightly. "Then she's the one who lost out," she said. That validation, from someone whose opinion I actually valued, meant more than any apology Rachel could manufacture. I told Keisha about the incident that evening over dinner at her place. She listened without interruption, then asked a single question. "How do you feel?" I considered it honestly. "Relieved," I admitted. I think I needed to see her like that, desperate and mean, to fully close that chapter. She hasn't changed. She's just losing and can't handle it. Keisha reached across the table, took my hand. "I'm glad you didn't cave," she said. "You deserve better than being someone's safety net." The weeks that followed were blissfully quiet. No more messages, no family ambushes, no workplace appearances. Rachel had finally gotten the message, or perhaps found a new target for her need. I didn't care which, just grateful to be free. My life continued its upward trajectory. Students thriving, relationship deepening, purpose fulfilled. The contrast between my trajectory and Rachel's couldn't have been starker. Then came the invitation that forced one final confrontation. A college friend, someone who'd known us both, was getting married in June. I was invited with a +1, and so was Rachel. The friend, Melissa, called me specifically. "I know things ended badly," she said carefully. "If it's too weird having you both there, I'll understand if you can't make it." I appreciated her consideration but refused to be driven away. "I'll be there," I said. "With my girlfriend." Keisha was initially hesitant about attending an event where we'd encounter Rachel. "Are you sure you want to deal with that?" she asked. "I don't want to be a prop in some revenge scenario." Her concern was valid and appreciated. "You're not a prop," I assured her. "You're my partner, and I want you there because I care about you. If Rachel happens to be there too, that's incidental." She studied me, seemed to believe my sincerity, and agreed to come. The wedding was beautiful, held at a vineyard upstate with mountains in the background. Keisha looked stunning in a green dress that brought out her eyes, confident and warm. We arrived deliberately not early, avoiding awkward pre-ceremony encounters. The crowd was a mix of college friends, some I'd stayed close with, others I'd lost touch with during my relationship with Rachel. Their reactions to seeing me with someone new ranged from surprised to delighted. I spotted Rachel during the ceremony, sitting on the opposite side several rows ahead. She was alone, dressed impeccably in a navy dress that probably cost more than my monthly rent. From the back, she looked like the old Rachel, polished and professional. But when I caught a glimpse of her face during the recessional, I saw the strain. She looked thin, brittle, like she might shatter under the wrong pressure. The reception was where things got complicated. Melissa had done a kindness by seating us at opposite ends of the space, but mingling was inevitable. I was at the bar getting drinks when Rachel approached, her presence announced by familiar perfume. "Hello, Marcus," she said, her voice carefully neutral. I turned, drinks in hand. "Rachel," I acknowledged. "How are you?" The pleasantry felt absurd given our history. "I've been better," she admitted, attempting a self-deprecating laugh that fell flat. "Work is still rocky, and I'm sure you heard about everything." I hadn't heard details beyond the initial rumors, and I didn't want them. "I hope things improve for you," I said, meaning it in the abstract way you wish well for strangers. She glanced at the 2 drinks in my hands. "You're here with someone," she observed. It wasn't a question. "I am," I confirmed, offering nothing more. The silence stretched uncomfortable between us. "Is it serious?" she asked, unable to help herself. I considered lying or deflecting but chose honesty. "It's good," I said simply. "We're happy." The word happy landed heavy. Everything she wasn't. She nodded, swallowed hard. "That's good. You deserve that." Before I could respond, Keisha appeared at my side, reading the situation instantly. "Hey, babe," she said, sliding her arm through mine. "Am I interrupting?" Her presence was grounding, real. Everything Rachel's had stopped being months before our split. "Not at all," I said. "Keisha, this is Rachel, my ex-Rachel. This is Keisha, my girlfriend." The introduction was deliberately simple, no elaboration needed. The 2 women assessed each other with the particular scrutiny of past and present. Keisha extended her hand first, gracious and unintimidated. "Nice to meet you," she said. Rachel shook it, maintaining her composure. "You too," she managed. "Marcus is a great guy. I hope you realize how lucky you are." The comment was pointed, a last-ditch effort to establish herself as the authority on my value. Keisha smiled, a warmth that didn't quite reach her eyes. "I do," she said, "every single day." The simple statement carried weight, a declaration of appreciation that Rachel had never quite managed. I felt the contrast acutely, saw it register on Rachel's face. This wasn't a competition, but if it were, the winner was clear. Rachel excused herself quickly after that, retreating to her table. I watched her go, felt Keisha's questioning gaze. "You okay?" she asked. I looked down at her, this woman who'd walked into my fractured life and helped me rebuild it without even trying. "Yeah," I said honestly. "I really am." We rejoined our table, and I didn't look in Rachel's direction for the rest of the night. The evening progressed with dancing and toasts, laughter and celebration. Our table was lively, filled with friends who asked genuine questions about my new school and congratulated me on the work I was doing. Keisha fit seamlessly into conversations, telling stories from her social work that had people both laughing and tearing up. This was my community, people who measured success in impact rather than income. I noticed Rachel leaving early, before the cake cutting, slipping out alone without saying goodbye to many people. Part of me felt sympathy for her isolation, the bed she'd made and now lay in, but mostly I felt grateful for the path that had led me here, to this moment with these people. Her rejection had been a gift in disguise, forcing me to find my own worth. Keisha and I stayed until the end, helping clean up centerpieces and saying long goodbyes. On the drive home, she was quiet, processing. Finally, she spoke. "She's still in love with you," she observed. "Or at least in love with the idea of you, the safety you represented." I considered this. "Maybe," I admitted, "but that's not my problem anymore." "Did seeing her make you question anything?" Keisha asked, vulnerability showing. "About us? Or whether you made the right choice?" I pulled over at a scenic overlook, wanting to answer this face to face. "The only thing seeing her confirmed," I said, "is that leaving was the best decision I ever made. Not just because she made me feel small, but because it led me to you, to a life that actually fits who I am." Keisha's eyes shimmered with emotion. "I was so nervous about tonight," she admitted. "She's beautiful and successful, and you have all this history. I thought maybe you'd see her and realize what you'd lost." I took her hand, pressed it to my chest. "What I lost was someone who couldn't see me." What I found is someone who does. There's no comparison, Keisha. You win by every measure that matters. We sat there as the sun set over the valley, two people who'd found each other in the aftermath of other disappointments. The future felt wide open, full of possibility untainted by doubt. Rachel and her friends had wondered why I wasn't enough, but they'd asked the wrong question. The real question was why I'd ever thought I needed to be different than I was. Months passed, and I heard less and less about Rachel through the grapevine. She'd apparently left her firm, moved to a different city for a fresh start. The squad had fully dissolved, each member dealing with their own consequences. Vanessa's professional misconduct had cost her clients. Derek faced legal troubles. Simone was in rehab. The house of cards built on superficial values had collapsed entirely. My life, meanwhile, continued to expand in meaningful ways. The alternative school won a district award for student improvement, validating the approach I championed. Keisha and I moved in together, a modest place near her work where we hosted game nights and student poetry readings. I reconnected with my passion for writing, started working on a book about educational philosophy that several educators expressed interest in. One evening in early fall, almost a year after the coffee shop conversation that ended things, I received one final message from Rachel. It came via LinkedIn, a platform I'd forgotten to block her on. "Marcus, I know I have no right to contact you," it began. "I'm not asking for anything or expecting a response. I just wanted you to know that I'm in therapy, working through why I sabotaged the best thing in my life. You deserved better than what I gave you. I hope you found it." I read the message twice, considered responding, then closed it without reply. There was nothing left to say, no closure needed beyond what I'd already found. She was working through her issues, and I genuinely hoped she found peace. But her journey was separate from mine now, two paths that had diverged and would never converge again. Keisha noticed me staring at my phone, asked if everything was okay. Rachel sent a final apology, I explained, acknowledging she messed up, hoping I'm happy. Keisha waited, letting me process. "And?" she prompted. I set the phone down, pulled her close. "And I am happy," I said. "Happier than I ever was with her, because I'm not trying to be someone I'm not." That winter, I asked Keisha to marry me in the same classroom where I taught, surrounded by student artwork and literary quotes on the walls. It wasn't fancy or public, just honest and intimate. Exactly us. She cried and said yes, and we celebrated with my students who'd somehow known it was coming. They'd written us poems as gifts, words about love and second chances that showed how much they'd grown. The wedding was small, held in my mother's church with the community that had raised me. My students formed an honor guard with decorated pencils instead of swords, making everyone laugh. Keisha's family welcomed me warmly, and mutual friends from teaching and social work filled the pews. There were no corporate lawyers or investment bankers, no judgment about modest budgets or simple venues. Just love, genuine and uncomplicated. During my vows, I spoke about the journey that led me to Keisha, the breaking that allowed rebuilding. "I was with someone who made me question my value," I said, voice steady, "who listened to voices that said I wasn't enough because I chose purpose over profit. But losing her helped me find you, helped me find myself. You don't wonder why you're with me. You celebrate it, and I celebrate you every single day." Keisha's vows echoed the theme of finding each other in the ruins of what came before. "You taught me that ambition comes in many forms," she said. "That changing lives is worth more than climbing ladders. That being seen is more valuable than being envied. I don't wonder about us, Marcus. I'm certain." The certainty in her voice, mirrored by the certainty in my heart, was everything Rachel and I had lacked. Our honeymoon was a road trip through national parks, camping and hiking and disconnecting from digital noise. We read books aloud to each other by campfire, talked about the future we'd build, made love under stars unobscured by city lights. It was perfect in its simplicity, exactly what we both needed. No exotic resorts or social media posts, just us. When we returned, life settled into a beautiful rhythm. Teaching, social work, shared dinners where we'd download our days, weekend trips to visit my mother, who'd adopted Keisha as the daughter she'd never had. Student events where Keisha would volunteer, forming bonds with kids who needed her professional skills and personal kindness. We were building something sustainable, rooted in shared values. I heard through an old mutual friend that Rachel had gotten engaged to someone she met in her new city, another lawyer from a good family. The friend shared this carefully, watching for my reaction. I felt nothing but a distant gladness that she'd apparently found what she was looking for. "That's great," I said honestly. "I hope it works out." And I meant it because her happiness or lack thereof no longer impacted mine. Years passed, and the sharpness of that coffee shop conversation faded into just another part of my history. I tell the story sometimes to student teachers I mentored, cautionary tale about knowing your worth. Don't let anyone make you small, I'd advise. If they're questioning why they're with you, they're not your people. The lesson had cost me 5 years and considerable pain, but it had also led me exactly where I needed to be. Keisha and I had 2 kids eventually, raised them with the same values that had brought us together. They attended the schools where I taught, saw their fathers work firsthand. I watched them develop empathy and critical thinking, saw them value substance over surface. When my daughter was in middle school, she asked me once why I became a teacher when I could have made more money doing something else. I thought about Rachel's question years earlier, the implication that my choice was settling. Because changing lives matters more than changing bank accounts, I told my daughter. Because every kid deserves someone who believes in them, and I get to be that person. That's not settling, baby. That's winning. She nodded, satisfied, and went back to her homework. The answer was simpler now, untainted by anyone else's doubt. On our 10th anniversary, Keisha and I returned to the vineyard where Melissa's wedding had been. Full circle. We walked the grounds, talked about everything that had happened since that night, when Rachel had realized what she'd lost. "Do you ever think about her?" Keisha asked, not jealous, just curious. I considered the question honestly. "Sometimes," I admitted, "but only to appreciate how far I've come from that version of myself." "The version that would have stayed?" Keisha asked. I nodded. "The version that thought I needed to be different to deserve love, that stability was boring, that purpose wasn't enough. She did me a favor ending it, even if it didn't feel like it at the time." Keisha smiled, that warm smile I'd wake up to for decades. "Then I guess I owe her a thank you," she joked, "for being too blind to see what she had." We sat on a bench overlooking the valley, the same view that had been behind the ceremony that night. The sun was setting, painting everything golden. "You know what's funny?" I said. "She told me I was safe, boring, that she needed excitement and ambition. But the life we've built, teaching kids others give up on, fostering teenagers, traveling when we can, writing, creating, that's more adventurous than anything she was chasing." Keisha leaned her head on my shoulder. "Adventure isn't about money or status," she agreed. "It's about impact and growth and love. You're the least boring person I know, Marcus. You're just boring to people who value the wrong things." Her words settled something that had been healing for years, a final affirmation that Rachel's judgment said everything about her and nothing about me. As we drove home that evening, I thought about the note I'd left Rachel the day I'd moved out. "You and your friends can wonder together why you're alone now." It had felt harsh at the time, but it was also prophetic. She'd gotten exactly what she'd asked for, freedom from me, and discovered too late what she'd actually had. The wondering she'd admitted to had become her reality. But I wasn't defined by her mistakes anymore. Wasn't the guy she'd left in that coffee shop. I was a husband, father, educator, writer, friend to people who counted. I was enough exactly as I was, not in spite of my choices but because of them. The years had proven what Rachel couldn't see, that a life built on meaning outlasts one built on appearances. Sometimes late at night, when grading papers or preparing lessons, I'd think about that moment when she'd said her friends were asking why she was with me. I'd feel the ghost of that pain, the betrayal and diminishment. Then I'd look at my life. Sleeping kids, loving wife, students whose lives I'd changed. The answer to why anyone would be with me was written in every corner of my existence. I never did respond to Rachel's final apology, that LinkedIn message acknowledging her sabotage. There was nothing to say that my life didn't already declare. I'd found better, built better, become better. Her wondering had freed me to stop wondering about myself. I knew my worth now, independent of anyone's validation or doubt. The last I heard, Rachel was doing okay in her new life, still climbing corporate ladders and hosting dinner parties. I hoped she'd learned something from our implosion, found some authenticity beneath the performance. But it wasn't my concern anymore, hadn't been for years. She was a chapter, closed and filed, informative but not definitive. What defined me was the choice I'd made that day in the coffee shop, to walk away from someone who couldn't see me, to rebuild rather than beg, to trust that something better existed beyond her limited vision. That choice had led to everything good in my life, every joy and achievement. Rachel had wondered why she was with me. I'd wondered why I'd stayed so long. Now, years later, surrounded by a life of purpose and passion, I finally had my answer. I'd stayed because I hadn't yet learned that I deserved better, that love without respect isn't love at all. That lesson, painful as it was, had been the catalyst for everything after. Rachel's doubt had forced my certainty. So when I tell this story now to students or young teachers struggling with similar situations, I focus on the transformation, not the betrayal. Someone questioning your worth isn't a reason to change who you are. I explain. It's information about who they are. The coffee shop conversation that shattered me had also freed me, and for that I was ultimately grateful. Because in the end, Rachel was right about one thing: we wanted different things. She wanted a life that looked successful. I wanted a life that was meaningful. She measured worth by external validation. I measured it by internal integrity. Those differences were irreconcilable, and her honesty about them, however painful, was a gift. The gift of knowing that I'd never have to wonder why someone was with me again. Because the right people don't wonder. They know. They're certain. And that certainty, that bone-deep assurance of being valued exactly as you are, is worth more than any corporate partnership or social approval. It's worth everything. Thank you for watching all the way through. There's another story to your left screen. You'll enjoy it more than this one.